On a scorching July afternoon in 1943, above the dusty airfield of Castelvetrano in Sicily, history was about to be rewritten in machine gun fire and twisted metal. The German Focke-Wulf 190 pilot never detected the approaching P-40 Warhawk until bullets ripped through his fuselage, sending his aircraft into a fatal spiral toward the Mediterranean countryside below. First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana, had just accomplished what Luftwaffe commanders considered impossible. A black pilot had destroyed one of their elite fighter aircraft. The swastika that Hall painted on his P-40L Warhawk that afternoon would become the first of 112 enemy aircraft destroyed by pilots whom German aviators would reportedly come to call Schwarzvogelmännchen, the Black Birdman. This moment marked the beginning of a systematic demolition of Nazi racial theories, written in contrails across European skies by 992 highly trained pilots from Tuskegee, Alabama. Nazi Germany's racial doctrine had classified black people as Untermenschen, subhumans incapable of mastering complex machinery or demonstrating courage in combat. The Nuremberg laws had forbidden marriages between Germans and people of African descent. Yet above the Mediterranean, this ideology was about to collide catastrophically with reality, as these American airmen would prove that excellence in aerial combat transcended racial categorization. What Luftwaffe pilots didn't realize as they climbed to intercept American bombers in 1943 was that they faced some of the most rigorously trained, highly motivated fighter pilots in the entire United States Army Air Forces. These were men who had overcome obstacles their white counterparts never encountered, who had trained harder and longer than standard pilots, and who carried into battle not just national duty, but the burden of proving an entire race's capability. The mathematics of aerial combat would soon be written across European skies. 15,000 combat sorties on 578 missions, 112 aerial victories, and a bomber escort loss rate significantly lower than white fighter groups. These statistics would force even fanatical Nazi ideologues to confront the bankruptcy of their racial theories. The journey toward that first aerial victory began not in combat, but within America's own hostile environment of segregation. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College had published a report titled Employment of Negro Manpower in War, concluding that compared to white men, blacks were, admittedly of inferior mentality, and inherently weak in character. This official military assessment claimed that black soldiers lacked intelligence for technical roles and courage for combat leadership. Yet, even as military leaders clung to these prejudices, a small group of black Americans was already proving them wrong. Eugene Bullard had flown for France in World War I because America wouldn't permit him to serve. Bessie Coleman had earned her pilot's license in France in 1921 when no American flight school would accept her. By the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago had trained dozens of black civilian pilots, demonstrating that flying skill recognized no racial boundaries. Pressure for change intensified as war clouds gathered over Europe. Civil rights leaders like Walter White of the NAACP, Labor leader A. Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hasty lobbied relentlessly for black inclusion in military aviation. Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, Baltimore Afro-American, hammered the Roosevelt administration with a simple question. How could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 finally cracked open the door. Senator Harry H. Schwartz had inserted an amendment requiring the civilian pilot training program to include schools designated by the Civil Aeronautics Authority for training black pilots. It was a grudging concession wrapped in segregation, but it was a beginning. When Franklin Roosevelt ran for an unprecedented third term in 1940, he needed black votes in key northern cities. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. The announcement came with a revealing caveat. This would be an experiment to test whether blacks could be trained as combat pilots. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. understood the weight of command when he led 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. The son of America's first black general, Davis had endured 4 years of silent treatment at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him outside official duties. Now he commanded men who carried not just their own hopes, but the aspirations of 13 million black Americans. The 99th arrived at Farjana, Tunisia, attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Momia, a commander who made no secret of his skepticism about black pilots. Momia assigned them patrol missions over the Mediterranean, keeping them away from real action. He wanted them to fail, and when they didn't immediately excel, he had his excuse. The morning of June 2, 1943, marked their first combat mission, an attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As their worn P-40 Warhawks climbed toward targets, German fighters suddenly appeared. The Tuskegee pilots held formation, protecting their bombers. No aircraft were lost on either side, but the Germans had learned their first lesson: these pilots wouldn't break under pressure. But July 2, 1943, changed everything. Charles Hall was flying his 8th mission, escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers attacking Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. 2 Fock, Wolf 190s bore down on the bomber formation. Hall later testified, "I saw 2 Fock Wolfs following the bombers just after bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between fighters and bombers and managed to turn inside the Jerrys. I fired a long burst and saw my tracers penetrate the second aircraft. He was turning left but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground." When Hall landed, the entire base erupted. Black ground crews, who had endured months of insults from white personnel, finally had their answer to every slight. Hall's victory was the first aerial kill by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for 7 months. But Colonel Momia had filed a devastating report, claiming they lacked aggressiveness and recommending their removal from combat. The report reached General Henry Hap Arnold, who prepared to shut down the experiment. Then came Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe launched massive raids on Allied forces at the Anzio beachhead. 15 pilots of the 99th, flying obsolete P-40s, encountered superior Fock, Wolf 190s over the battlefield. What followed would silence critics forever. The 99th shot down multiple enemy aircraft. Sources vary between 8 and 13 kills over 2 days. Captain Charles Hall claimed 2 more victories, bringing his total to 3. In 2 days, flying inferior equipment, they had destroyed more enemy aircraft than in their previous 7 months of combat. The War Department launched a study comparing the 99th with other P-40 squadrons and concluded they were performing as well as white units. The success at Anzio proved black pilots could excel in combat when given opportunity. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group, combining the 99th, 100th, 301st and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, received orders that would transform them from outcasts to legends. They would join the 15th Air Force as bomber escorts, flying long, dangerous missions deep into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin Davis gathered his pilots at Ramitelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast. "We cannot afford to lose bombers," he told them. "Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home." This directive would define their combat philosophy: stay with the bombers no matter what. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining ordered a systematic marking system for fighter groups. Each would receive distinctive colors for instant identification. The 332nd was assigned red, not just red noses or bands, but entire tail sections painted crimson. The P-51 Mustangs with their red tails, red propeller spinners, and red nose bands became instantly recognizable. The first bomber crews to receive red tail escorts didn't know their protectors were black. They only knew these fighters stayed close, never abandoning them for easy kills. Word spread through bomber groups: request the red tails if you can get them. July 18, 1944, would test the red tails like never before. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. The bombers were late. Davis made a crucial decision: orbit in enemy territory rather than return to base. When bombers finally appeared, so did the Luftwaffe, approximately 100 German fighters attacking from multiple directions. The Germans had learned that overwhelming numbers might break the Red Tail's protective screen. Despite fierce defense by the 332nd, who claimed 11 to 12 victories, 15 B-17s fell to enemy fighters in 20 minutes of savage combat. The 332nd lost 3 pilots: Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics claimed the high bomber losses proved black pilots couldn't handle major battles, but operational analysis revealed the truth. The 332nd had arrived at an impossible situation with massive German forces already engaging bombers. They had prevented complete disaster. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe's conventional fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy, but Germany had one last card: the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of 540 mph, it could outrun any propeller-driven aircraft. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received its most challenging assignment: escort bombers 1 600 miles round trip to Berlin to attack the Daimler-Benz tank factory. Intelligence warned that Me-262s from Jagergeschwader 7 would defend the target. Colonel Davis led 40 3P-51 Mustangs into the heart of the Reich. As they approached Berlin, Me-262s appeared, the largest jet fighter force ever assembled for a single interception. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had studied the jets' weaknesses. "We knew the German jets were faster than we were. Instead of going directly after them, we went away from them and then turned into their blind spots," he explained. Brown shot down one Me-262, reporting, "I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb and fired 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock to him. Almost immediately, the pilot bailed out from about 24,500 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane performed what many considered impossible, shooting down an Me-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 computing gun sight." Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed the third jet victory that day. The destruction of 3 Me-262s in a single engagement represented more jets than most fighter groups would destroy in the entire war. The Red Tails had just exceeded the total of all previous American Me-262 kills in one afternoon. The 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit citation for this mission. Not all encounters between Tuskegee Airmen and Germans ended in victory. 32 pilots became prisoners of war, and their experiences revealed complex interactions between Nazi ideology and military reality. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, during his 19th mission. His P-51 took flak over southern France while strafing radar installations. At his interrogation, the German officer had extensive intelligence about the 332nd Fighter Group. The interrogator had information about Ramitelli Airfield, about our squadron commanders, even details about my parents' home in Detroit, Jefferson recalled. He knew my father was a teacher and my mother's maiden name. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough. Inside Stalag Luftwaffe, Jefferson found himself treated like any other American officer. White POWs from bomber crews often approached him with gratitude for red tail protection. These interactions, impossible in segregated America, occurred naturally in German prison camps. The irony wasn't lost on Jefferson. Here I was in a Nazi pub camp, being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home. When the war ended and Jefferson returned to the United States, he was immediately segregated at the disembarkation point. While German pilots reportedly acknowledged the Red Tails' skill with the nickname Schwarzvogelmenschen, American bomber crews became their most vocal champions. These men who faced death on every mission cared nothing about race, only survival. Bomber crews developed their own mythology about the Red Tails. Stories spread about their distinctive flying style, the way they waggled wings in greeting, their tight formations, their refusal to abandon damaged bombers. Red Tail Angels became the bomber crew's name for them. The statistics supported bomber crews' preferences. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Hallman revealed that bombers under 332nd Fighter Group Escort lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups of the 15th Air Force. This superior protection rate occurred despite the Red Tails flying some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By war's end, The Tuskegee Airmen had compiled a combat record that demolished every pre-war assumption about black military capability. Their achievements included 578 combat missions flown, over 15,000 individual sorties completed, 179 bomber escort missions, 100 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground, and 3 Mi-62 jet fighters shot down on March 24, 1945. Their protection record showed 27 bombers lost to enemy fighters versus 46 average for other groups, maintaining a superior protection rate across 179 escort missions. Individual achievements included Lee Archer with 4 confirmed victories, Joseph Ellsbury with 4 victories including 3 FW-190s on July 12, 1944, Edward Toppins with 4 victories, and Clarence Lester with 3 kills in 1 mission on July 18, 1944. The human cost was significant: 66 pilots killed in action, 32 pilots captured as prisoners of war, and 84 killed in training and non-combat missions. Yet their transformation from mockery to respect reflected superior American training methods and technological advantages the red tails wielded with precision. At Tuskegee, pilots flew more hours than their white counterparts, 300 compared to 200 for white pilots. They practiced formation flying obsessively, knowing that in combat discipline would be their edge. The washout rate at Tuskegee was 60% compared to 40% for white cadets. Only the very best survived the program, creating what Colonel Noel Parrish, Tuskegee commander, called a super-selected group. The Tuskegee Airmen fought 2 wars simultaneously against fascism abroad and racism at home. Their combat record challenged both Nazi racial ideology and American segregation, proving that excellence in aerial combat transcended racial categorization. While they fought Germans abroad, they battled prejudice at home. Their victories over the Luftwaffe made headlines in black newspapers, but were often minimized or ignored by mainstream press. Recognition came slowly. President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the U.S. military, a decision influenced by the Tuskegee Airmen's combat performance. Benjamin Davis, who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Tuskegee Airmen. Only 300 of the original pilots survived to attend, many having waited over 60 years for national recognition. The transformation from mockery to respect wasn't mythology but documented fact. The numbers remain irrefutable. 112 aerial victories against the Luftwaffe, 3 Mi-262 jet fighters destroyed in 1 mission, 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground, 27 bombers lost versus 46 average for other groups, and 96 distinguished flying crosses earned by 332nd Fighter Group pilots. The reportedly nicknamed Schwarz-Vogelmännchen proved that prejudice crumbles when confronted with undeniable capability. Every German fighter destroyed, every bomber protected, every mission completed added evidence to an irrefutable case. The color of a pilot's skin had nothing to do with his ability to fly and fight. Roscoe Brown, who shot down a German jet over Berlin, summarized their achievement: "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen hadn't just won battles. They had changed history. Fighting 3 wars simultaneously and winning them all, defeating the Luftwaffe in combat, challenging Nazi racial ideology through performance, and eventually helping demolish American segregation through undeniable excellence. When given the opportunity, the Tuskegee Airmen soared, transforming mockery into respect, prejudice into acceptance, and enemies into witnesses of their extraordinary achievement.